In the last 6 months, how has Danielle shown you to apply human design into your life and business?
I mean, first of all, I knew nothing about human design, really, going into meeting with Danielle to begin with. I mean, it was just what I'd heard. I heard her on her podcast or on a podcast, and then I started following her on social media and listening to her podcast. So it was pretty limited. And then I remember reaching out to her. I think it was probably around Christmas time and just asking her, what would she suggest in terms of like more information about human design, like a book maybe, or just some extra resources. And so she gave me a recommendation, which I ended up getting and reading over the Christmas break. So yeah, I didn't really know much about human design when I started working with Danielle. It was just, I guess initially it just sort of resonated with me because it something in it, like it wasn't like I knew anything about it, but there was something in me that just resonated with, oh, there's like an explanation, or there's other answers out there. There's another way of looking at life and looking at energy and looking at success and just looking at the universal laws and all those types of things. And this is the type of work I've been doing for a number of years in terms of like inner work and so it just was something that really appealed to me. I just wanted to learn more. And then the more I followed her, just the more that I learned about it. So I guess I'm not sure that's really answering your question, other than what I've learned from Danielle is it's about human design and then how to use it in my life and how to use it in my business. So It was really like a learning for me from basically zero to, okay, now I have like some knowledge and kind of an open portal to like more knowledge and just a different way of looking at my life. Right.
So I guess let's go back to, because here we are, July of 22. So you technically have been involved with Danielle for maybe just under a full year now.
Yeah, like I started working with her in January.
That was the one-on-one relationship. As for the content, though, it was did you say like December of 21?
Yeah, probably a little bit, probably more like November. I think I can't remember when she was. You can't remember. Yeah, it was around it was like late fall. And I started following her and just kind of like getting more curious about human design and like, what is this? I've never heard of it. So kind of, you Google and then you kind of go down like the rabbit hole of Google, but mostly just following her.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what part of your human design has Danielle been the most, giving you the most tools to apply to your life, and how is that?
Yeah, for me, it's about tapping into my energy and understanding how that energy works and how it works with other energies, and understanding sometimes like when I'm feeling a little bit triggered, or if I'm feeling like sometimes I feel like I'm influenced by other energies, but I never really understood that. I wasn't really aware of that. Like I kind of knew, other people are affecting me or influencing me, but just knowing how your actual human design works, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I understand that now. And I understand what I need to do to keep my own energy safe, I guess, and my own energy protected. And so I'm understanding a lot more about how to tap into my own energy and use that not just in business, but in life. I mean, I'm like you, I believe that everything's related and holistic, right? So it's not just like, let's use it in this part of your life, but it's not going to affect that part of your life, right? There's so many different areas of your life. And for me, when I started working with Danielle, like almost right away, like I had something really hard personally happen to me. And so it was like, boom, like whether you want to call it a test or whether you want to call it like just life, it was like, okay, so now how do I use what I'm learning in human design, even though it was really for my business, is why I went, why I decided to work with Danielle. It was more to grow and work my business. But as we know,
it evolves into much more.
It involves everything else, right? And so as soon as this thing happened in my life, it was like, okay, so how can I now use my energy, and how can I use what I know about human design, or what my work with Danielle was a lot of that unraveling around the personal aspect of things, not even so much about the business, but knowing that those two are very related. So that's been really interesting for me, is how do I use it in life, like my life, because my life is everything, right? It's not just the business. So that's been really interesting. Yeah.
So try to remember an example of something that in your design that you had to apply to your life. Like, you don't have to get into specifics, but this event that happened, what part of your design did you have to lean into in order to work through that?
My core wounds, like my shadow,
Okay.
a lot, which I guess part of me had known about that, and I've done some work around it, but the human design, especially the Gene Keys book, like I don't want to say that's the focus. The focus isn't about shadow and like going into that, but it's about understanding what your shadow is, and then on the flip side, what the gift is. And so for me, it was a lot of like really reflecting on the shadow piece and how much I sit in it and have sat in it, and what effect that has on my life, and how to be very aware of that, and then turn it into, okay, so now how do I go from shadow to gift? And how do I use that gift to teach others? Or how do I use that gift to communicate my offer? How do I use that gift to relate to other people around me? How do I use that gift to heal things like my partner? Like all of those types of things. But I was never really aware like how much I, in certain aspects, sat in the shadow.
Yeah.
And what that was doing.
Yeah.
And just even understanding what that shadow was, and what are my core wounds. Like I had never really identified that so much. And so for me, it's been really powerful. It's been really eye-opening. I've done a ton of journaling about it. I've never journaled so much as I have in the last 6 months since working with Danielle. And part of that is, her encouragement of like, journal on this, journal on that. But a lot of it is just, I'm noticing how much impact it has on me, and how much a lot of my content for my business comes from my journaling. Like it's been really amazing how things have just flowed out. And you were kind of asking like about the human design. It's like being able to tap into my own inner self, and I'm always so amazed like what channels through there, right? And what comes out, and just being really aware of that, because before I was like, I got inspired to write this, or, I've been really creative today, but it's not the same. Like now I'm like, okay, so how do I need to call in my higher self. I'm going to be sitting with her. Like understand that this is actually a channeling. This is not just like a burst of inspiration. There is that divine connection. And so for me, that's been really powerful. There's been lots of things, but just, to answer your question, it was mostly like understanding and being aware of the shadow piece, and then understanding that there's a gift component of that too. And how do you stay in that gift, right? Like how do you keep that in the frequency of that? And then being aware of when you are getting sucked into the shadow, like, okay, going into shadow, and just being like, aware of that, not judgy, not like negative about it, just being aware of that. So big piece for me has been awareness, like just awareness, and trust that it's going to take me somewhere.
And so on your journey from recognizing, you did all this work to recognize what the shadow and the gift is, and I know that there's a lot in between that. Where has Danielle provided you the most value in your journey from going from shadow to gift?
Well, I mean, helping me be aware of that piece, first of all, right? I mean, Danielle is very, I guess direct is a good word. Like she calls you out on it, right? When you need to, and not in an uncompassionate way, like in a very compassionate way. There's times though when, it's so funny. Like I'll tell her, like she kind of makes me mad a little bit. Like she'll say something or ask me a question or point something out, and I'll finish the session. I'll be like, grr, right? And then I'll like go for a walk, which is usually what I do after a session, and just kind of reflect, or I'll journal or something. Usually I move my body. And then I'm like, oh yeah, no, I get it. Like she's right? Like it's just sometimes our ego gets in the way of us actually seeing the thing. And I think that's what Danielle brings. It's like, let's set aside the ego, right? Let's go to the heart of the matter. Let's go to your inner wisdom. I'm here channeling that for you. And sometimes the ego gets a bit upset about it, right? So it's just, again, that awareness. I think the other powerful piece for me has been the channeling, right? Has been that like really, like, as she says, she calls it a divine appointment. And I think she lives that, like, that is how I feel when I go into session with her, that there is this energy and there is this channeling. And so this like innate trust in what she says, even though sometimes I'm like, I have to think about that, or I need to like ponder it, or I need to reflect on it a little bit more. It's still that like, this is coming from a source outside of both of us, like bigger than both of us as humans, right? And so I think it's just really having that grounding and that like, yeah, it's just almost that like she provides that level of belief for me that I might not have for myself.
Wow.
I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? Like, it's like, I tap into her belief, even when I'm like, I don't believe this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's really tapping into that, like really, really strong, like conviction of hers, and being like highly, highly inspired by that.
And when you take that belief, in what ways have you physically now, like physical examples in your life, how have you noticed your magnetism for just abundance increase, not just in business, but in life, like all your examples that come to mind?
Well, I'm still working on that. Still got some, things to work through on that. But again, it's the awareness, right? It's like being aware that like where I'm at right now is what I've attracted, and that I have enough right now, and I am getting what I'm asking for in like a good way, right? Because I tend to be like, well, it's not working. I don't have this, I don't have that. And it's like, my work with Danielle has been like, but look at all the things that you do have. Like, you want this, and this. Give me examples of how it's already in your life. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I do have that in my life already, right? So it's that different mindset of like, I already have that, and it's already here, and not having that ego say, but it's not what you want. It's not what you set out to do, or it's not like what you set in your goal, like all the ego things, right? Like, as opposed to, well, what is it that you have right now? Like really bringing it back to like the present. And so, yeah, it's that awareness piece for sure.
What do you have now that you didn't 6 months ago?
I think a lot more clarity, like definitely a lot more clarity in what my strengths are and what I bring. I definitely have a lot stronger conviction in what I'm doing. A lot stronger belief, I have way more connection to my higher self and my inner wisdom than I ever have before. So that, again, it's a work in progress, but definitely more like trust in myself and what I'm hearing. And also, it's almost like, I don't know if validation is the right word, but like knowing that what I know, like I tend to be very intuitive and very like, and I've always said this, like, well, my gut just told me to do this. And then I have to like rationalize to people the like analytical piece, like, oh, here's the numbers that support my intuition. And I think in the last 6 months, I'm like, but I'm okay to just trust my intuition. And I don't always have to explain it, right? Like, I don't have to be like, well, I know I better do the research that explains why I'm feeling this way. Sometimes it's just like, I'm really tapped in right now, and this is what I'm feeling, and I don't need to explain that. So I think that's been a big thing for me, just to really tap into, get out of my trained brain, right? Like, I'm so conditioned to be analytical, and I'm not by nature, which is what I'm learning, but that's how I've, like, my schooling and being in corporate and all this has like trained me, right? So I'm so conditioned to be that way. And so it's that deconditioning now that I'm really tapping into and really, again, I'm so aware of that. Okay, that's a conditioning, that's a programming. And it's just delayering all that stuff and just really trusting myself more.
Right. And so from during your deconditioning process, where are you seeing in like your day-to-day routine an increase in consistent action where you didn't before?
I mean, I have been like so committed to consistency. And I mean, I think that's part of my like human design is like, it's part of my being an emotional generator. Like, I think the consistency piece for me comes naturally. It doesn't feel like an obligation. I like having that consistency. But it's been very powerful tapping into, like, sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to write about. I don't know what I'm going to do my podcast on this week. And it's just trusting that it's going to come, and it does. And so then every week I'm like, oh, there it is. There's an idea. There's the words. There's like, there's the content. So it's made it almost easy to be consistent. But also being like committed to the consistency. So I think that's the piece that I worked on very early on with Danielle, was like, make the time in your calendar, like schedule it in. Don't just do things whenever you feel like it, like, because otherwise you're telling the universe that you're not really committed to it. So like really opening up the time and the space to do that, which I've done. So that's been like really powerful, like setting aside time to do certain things. That's been really good. So it's more that commitment to consistency, and then just seeing how that consistency comes pretty naturally to me.
Good. And throughout the 6 months, how has your perspective on scarcity shifted?
Yeah, I mean, my conditioning is like lack, right? And that's my default. It's like lack, scarcity, not enough, that kind of thing. So for me, it's that, again, I'm going to say this again, but that awareness of that's where I've sat for so long. And being like, I even have a sticky note here that says abundance everywhere or something like that I wrote in one of our sessions, that I'm like always looking at. Yeah, there's like abundance everywhere all the time. So it's a lot more top of mind than it's ever been in my life. You know, like I've read books about it and I've done a lot of work around it, but I've been back to the consistency word. I've been very consistent about being very aware of it and not slipping back into the lack. Like, I'm very aware of even my language. How am I talking about money? You know, like when I say things like, oh, I can't do that, that's too expensive, like stopping myself right away and turning that around, and just again, having that different mindset on it. So being very aware of that and just turning around my energy around those types of things and being a lot more expansive, like really leaning into the expansiveness. Okay, like what could money do? How can I invest differently? Maybe take some risks that I wouldn't have, you know, even a year ago, kind of thing. Like being a lot more expansive about it, a lot more open, not as shut down about things, not as like, nope, can't do that. Right. So just a lot more aware of like my language, my actions, my thoughts around it. For sure. Like it's just, again, it's that awareness piece. And then it's you know, I mean, I'm like double your age, right? So it's like turning that programming around after like this long. It's a process, right? Because it just doesn't happen overnight. But I'm definitely so much more aware of it than I ever have in my life, and so committed to like, no, I don't want to live in that like scarcity, lack, even to the point where there's like people that I don't want to hang around anymore because that's what they're always talking about. Right. Like, oh, the world's going to shit because this and the inflation and the that and the gas and all this kind of stuff. Right. And it's just, okay, like, I'm not going to be part of this conversation. Like, I get it. That's the reality. Sure. Groceries are more expensive. But then it's like, I'm so grateful that I can afford them. And I don't think about it. So it's like, it's just like a different shift and just not being sucked into that conversation with people.
Gotcha. And so now, having gone through, we're at the tail end here of the one-on-one. Now going through it, what type of client is Danielle really for? not having this good perspective on it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, any woman, I mean, I know her target is helping women. And I think, yeah, like I think any woman who wants to build her business, right? But it's more than just the business. So anybody who wants to have that abundance and that confidence in their life, because as I said at the beginning of this conversation, is it's all related.
Yeah.
And the thing I'm exploring right now is that, you know, the connection between love and money. And that's been a really interesting journey for me. And because I think they obviously are related, and I'm learning that from Danielle, and I'm learning that in my own life. But again, I don't think it's just about, I want to grow my business. It's also, I want to grow my relationships, or I want to grow my vitality, or I want to grow my meaningful connections with friends. Like it's all those things. So I think the ideal client would be someone who understands that that's all related. And maybe they're coming at it from, you know, I feel the most stuck in my business, but knowing that that's going to impact like all areas of their life. So someone who really wants to expand into, like, just be more expansive as a person through the vehicle of my business, right? So that's the kind of the platform. How can I help more people? How can I build relationships, you know, that are more meaningful? How can I really carry out my soul's purpose? And that's the platform, but it's not just about that. It's like so much more. And I think someone who is really open to that and not just coming in, but I just want to, you know, I just want to know how to grow my business, or how to grow my followers, or how to get like a good sales page out there. Like, I think someone who's like, and I also understand that the conversation can go a different direction. Like, it's not just about, but we have sessions, we don't talk about the business at all. It's something happening in life.
Now that we've established like the tools, you know, when going from A to Z, there's all the letters in between. And what I'd like to focus and shift gears to now is, as you've gone through this shadow to gift in your life, what changed physically that allowed, like, examples of times where you gain more clarity? Like, how is your business itself, if we're just going to focus on that, how has that evolved from what you thought it was going, what did you think it was going to be, and what is it now?
Yeah, like I thought it was going to be just me coaching people, right? And I think what it's evolved into is honing in on like the types of people that I want to coach, the types of women I want to coach, and the type of coaching I now do is more around understanding that shadow. So even if I'm not using that language with my clients, but just really understanding that piece that they may be sitting in shadow, and how do we get them into kind of their gift frequency. So I think it's definitely evolving into more of that energetic in my own way, right? But just being very aware of that, and then being able to help people see their own energy in that as well, and that they have a frequency and that their energy needs to be protected. So even if I mean, I'm not like teaching human design or anything like that, I'm not even using that language, but it's definitely the language of energy and frequency a lot more than maybe I think I would be doing a year ago. So definitely tapping more into that. Definitely also being more vulnerable in what I'm sharing in terms of content and how I'm putting myself out there. So really sharing the shadow side of things, again, maybe not using that language necessarily, but kind of sharing like, here's kind of where I've been, and here's, you know, how to get into a different perspective on that's higher frequency. So I think it's shifted around my storytelling and my content sharing, and how I'm approaching sharing with the world my value and my purpose. So that's definitely like shifted for sure. And I think there's more to come, you know, like it's going to just open up it's going to open up more, because as I learn to trust my own intuition and my higher self more, and take some of those bigger leaps, it's going to open up into more and more things, and just being very open to those things and not being like, but I want it to be this, and then I want it to be that, right? Like, again, taking the ego out of the equation and just letting things flow a little bit more.
Yeah.
For me as well, and again, I'm working through this, but I'm really a lot more focused on the sales side of things now. Because for me, sales, the story is I hate sales, right? I'm not good at it. I don't want to do it. I just want people to come to me because they know that I'm a great coach.
Yeah.
And my mindset shift around that has been, how can sales be like a service? And I think that's what Danielle says, right? And so it's really tapping into, how do I sell what I do and my purpose and my value in a way that's super aligned with my values and makes everyone feel comfortable. So that's been a big shift for me, right? Like, how do I do that? And I really listen to how Danielle does it on her podcast and how she does it in her emails and how she does it on social media. And I'm really tapping into that energy of like, okay, I see how she's doing it. It doesn't feel slimy to me. Like, it feels very authentic. It feels very compassionate. It feels very like, I want to help you. Mm-hmm. So I'm tapping into that in my own way. Like, how do I tap into the purpose that I offer people and then sell it and promote it to people in a way that's really genuine? So for me, that's been a big shift in the last little while. The whole sales thing and the energetic sales and the magnetic sales and the tapping into my energy, my authentic energy, and getting that energy out there so that it's magnetized back to me. So that's been a really interesting, for me. It's been an interesting process that I'm still going through. And I've shifted so much from the, oh, this is like, I don't want to do this sales page, to like, oh, I'm so excited to see how I can write what I want to write in a way that just feels really good to me.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess last thing about for a question would be, what is something that someone should know about working with Danielle that maybe isn't like out there on display yet?
It's a lot of deep inner work. Like, it's a lot of vulnerability. There's a lot of, for me anyways, probably because I'm an emotional generator, there's a lot of tears.
Yeah.
It's a lot of connecting with my emotions and my feelings. So I think that's a thing that, it sounds like, oh, I'm just going to go to a session and then do some journaling. Like, it's deep work, and it's very vulnerable. It requires a big commitment, and it requires an openness to change how you're doing things in your life, even routine wise, right? So, okay, now I'm really committed to journaling, or I'm committed to this, or I know I need to go for a walk every day. So how do I change my home schedule, my home life to support and nurture the things that I know that I need? So it's being really open to all those things. So I think that's the thing that people may not know, that it's a lot of being very self-reflective and being very open to what comes up, even if it is like a little bit of like anger or just kind of like frustration, but it's just being really open to all that, and knowing that there's times when it's really hard. Like, it's not easy work. It's super worthwhile, obviously. But it's definitely not easy. Like, it is, like I said, very vulnerable and very, even vulnerable to me. Like, I need to be vulnerable to me, right? I need to be open to me. I need to be like opening up my heart. I need to be setting aside my ego. I need to be setting aside past beliefs, right? I need to set aside what I think I know. I need to set aside all these things. And that's hard to do. That's really hard to do, to be like, I'm just going to set all that aside and just be open to like curiosity and like energy, right?
Yeah. Well, I actually got an idea for something else here. How does it, being that you had to reconnect with your emotional energy, being that that's your authority, how did you feel before 6 months ago? And then how do you feel now, being reconnected with it?
I think 6 months ago, I definitely wasn't, I was more cerebral, right? It was more like, I want to grow this business. How do I do that? What are the tactics? Like, what are the strategies? Again, very analytical. So it was more like a thinking thing. Like, it was more like a planning exercise, or like a brain exercise. And now I feel like it's more like, it's less about that. And there's a component of that. Like, you need to have plans, you need to have action ideas, you need to actually do things. But it's more around, how do I feel, and how am I tapping into my own intuition? So it's shifted a bit from the cerebral part of it, and also being able to not get sucked into some of the other things that are like distractions that are out there, like the how to, you can go to all these webinars, like how to grow your Instagram followers, how to do all that stuff. Like, it's allowed me to be like, I don't need to listen to that. Like, I can listen to what I need in my own self. And then I can distill what I need. Maybe there are some good things out there, but I'm able to distill it a bit more. So it's more about doing things my own way, as opposed to like, there needs to be this plan and this system and all those types of things. Yeah, so I definitely feel a lot more empowered. I definitely feel a lot more calm, I think is the word. Like a lot less scattered maybe, and a lot more knowing that there's an explanation for these things. Like, I can go to the Gene Keys, or I can go to some of my, my gates or whatever, and just kind of look and, okay, there's something that I can tap into that's going to help me formulate like why I'm feeling this way, or why this is happening to me. Like, there's something that can help me.